True North is an original podcast by Due North PR. We do everything we can to ensure that everything we broadcast is fair and factual, but the opinions expressed and statements made by our guests are theirs and theirs alone. These opinions and statements do not reflect the views or opinions of our presenters, Due North PR, or the podcast itself. You're listening to True North, a regular roundup of business and community news and developments in Northland. Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of True North. Thank you for taking the time to listen. It's Wednesday, the 2nd of April. I'm Peter Heath. On the show ahead.
The connection was, okay, we don't have the money to restart Marsden Point or indeed nationalise it. And we can hardly find the money to rebuild the Whangarei Hospital, let alone find $6 to $7 billion and restart Marsden Point.
I speak with Regional Development Minister Shane Jones about his recent teaser involving a potential special economic zone at Marsden Point, and ask him for some details that have been missing until now. First though, a look at what's happening in business and community news across our region. Prominent economist Cameron Bagri has taken to online business news outlet Business Desk to ask whether the New Zealand investment community is too passive when it comes to lying back and accepting poor financial results from some of our listed companies. At what point does wealth destruction become a catalyst for a management and board clean-out? And at what point should the investment community become more active in driving this, he asks. In a bylined article, he suggests the shift the market is seeing towards passive investing strategies might be resulting in diminished shareholder activism, something he says is a recipe for complacent management. Are investment managers really acting in the best interests of their investors by being passive, he asks, and do we have sufficient business nous across the media to ask the probing questions? Indeed. Steve Mutton, NZTA's Director of Regional Relationships for Northland and Auckland, has reassured Northland business leaders that his agency will ensure, quotes, significant involvement from local companies and suppliers in the construction of the Warkworth to Tahana leg of the new Northland Corridor. The preferred bidder will be selected in early 2026. The PPP contract will be finalised by the middle of 2026, and detailed design and construction is expected to start in late 2026. A consortium of Aussie PPP project specialist Plenary, Italian construction giant WeBuild, and the Malaysian infrastructure player Gamuda Berhad, along with local players, has already indicated that it will bid for the multi-billion-dollar Northland Expressway project. We hope to have Steve or someone from NZTA join us on True North reasonably soon to talk about how Northland businesses should be positioning themselves now to take full advantage of this all-too-rare economic opportunity. Speaking of opportunity, the deadline is approaching for entries to the PIC, a competitive bid for a 10-week business support program designed to help Northland entrepreneurs take their businesses to the next level. Entries are due in by 5 p.m. on Friday the 11th of April. They'll be assessed by a team from North Chamber, Northland Inc., MSD, and the Whāriki Te Taitokoro. Those who make it through this initial PIC process will learn how to refine their ideas, craft compelling value propositions, master their finances and secure investment, and build the right team to bring their visions to life. We'll post a link in the show notes if you'd like to enter. And finally, community group Our Kerikeri plans to develop a visitor promotion strategy to bring more tourists to the town and to the wider Bay of Islands area. It will be applying to the Taitokoro Impact Fund for the money it will need to brand Kerikeri as the arts and artisan hub of the Bay, something it feels will differentiate the town from the other centres in the area. So now, in late February, Regional Development Minister Shane Jones, wearing his Associate Energy Minister hat, dropped a bombshell at Marsden Point. This, he declared, could become the site of a special economic zone that would help propel economic growth north of Auckland. The next day, I spoke with a number of business leaders, some within Northland and others further afield. Reaction, I have to say, was mixed. Some were feverishly excited, and others predictably were in the more cynical, it'll never happen camp. Well, today I'm delighted to have with me the man himself, the Honourable Matua Shane. Minister, good morning and thanks for joining us on True North.
Greetings, folks, from the Beehive to Northland and whoever else may be tuned in.
Thank you. Look, Minister, this concept of special economic zones seemingly came out of nowhere. It's a topic that's been kicked around in the background within Northland for a while, but it's not been a prominent part of the public conversation around regional development. I floated the idea with Marsden Maritime Holdings over a decade ago and was told it would never work because I think I was told it was unacceptable economic ideology. And Northland Inc.'s Paul Linton told us just 2 days before your announcement that whenever he raised the possibility in Wellington, it was met with some wariness by bureaucrats for exactly the same reason. So where did this idea of special economic zones come from? What's the background and context here? And why were so many business leaders seemingly, at least in Northland, caught so off guard by this proposition, do you think?
Well, Winston Peters first campaigned on it in 1996. The idea he picked up from Singapore and the original stages of the Irish economic miracle. Parts of England have implemented the policy. But I think it's fair to say, since the days of Ruth Richardson, we have taken a one-size-fits-all approach to economic and regional policy in New Zealand. Now, as you know, I'm a bit of a doubting Thomas about all the hysteria and hyperbole and shrillness around climate change. I also think that the high tide mark of climate change activism has come and gone. However, we are obliged under international agreements to do the best we can, and an area that's proving to be really difficult to improve in relation to emissions, or indeed boost our economic resilience, is energy. And nowhere is there a site with equal strategic importance in the whole country than Marsden Point. Take out Marsden Point and you will have the economy on its knees within a week. Therefore, creating a zone around Marsden Point which magnetizes investors and brings together clusters of energy-orientated investors, freed from onerous planning obligations, and if I have my way, then once a zone is created through a statute, it's given the planning consents. The statute will give them the planning consents. And subject to an engineer ticking things off in a tin shed in the corner somewhere, these zones would have a bespoke planning set of entitlements. Where it gets tricky is what range of tax concessions ought to be made available, and that's where I think most doubting Thomases fear that it'll never happen, so why are you spending any energy on it? And I think for the North that just reflects the historic diet and appetite of low expectations.
Yeah.
The North hasn't just been neglected by central government, it's hobbled itself with low expectations. Of course, I grew up in the North, so I understand these low expectations. It's akin to being a domestic abuse victim, quite frankly. And people loudly opposed Winston and myself when we started putting capital into the North through the PGF. We had the absurd situation where the former mayor of the Whangarei District Council turned down a $65 million grant of free money to redevelop downtown Whangarei with a convention centre and a privately owned hotel. So I'm no longer surprised by the pygmy attitudes that fear not only change, but look askance at changing the settings for the northern area. But we're going to go ahead and build the dry dock facility.
Yep.
We're going to see an extension of the port. We're going to see the connection of the rail to the port. We're going to have the 4-lane highway, and we're going to have an economic zone with bespoke planning powers, and if I have my way, with other economic incentives. So that's the whole package.
Okay.
But it's not correct for Northland to say that it's just a sudden idea. Winston's been campaigning on it since 1996.
Yeah, okay, good. Listen, the language used in the news release in which you floated the idea of special economic zones was pretty non-committal, for a reason, I guess. You spoke of Cabinet considering a range of options, including SEZs. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think it will be that SEZs, specifically in Northland or at Marsden Point, will survive the scrutiny of the mandarins and get to become a viable agenda item at Cabinet?
Well, we've got about 16 months, and then we'll all be back in the boxing ring for the election. And we've got a very full dance card. And this body of work has flowed out of the different reports that we commissioned, what to do with the future of Marsden Point. So if you want to draw a connection, the connection was, okay, we don't have the money to restart Marsden Point or indeed nationalise it. And we can hardly find the money to rebuild the Whangarei Hospital, let alone find $6 to $7 billion and restart Marsden Point. But there are a host of initiatives underway at Marsden Point where refining activity will start yet again, but it'll be more on the direction of biofuels and such matters, and that's up to the private sector.
Okay, so
the private sector can. I'll just finish here. The private sector can easily accelerate its own development. And look, what I'm doing is trying as hard as I can before the next election. And if we don't get there before the next election, it's going to be the centre point of our campaign.
Okay, well, that answers another question that I had. Look, is your thinking that an SEZ in, say, Marsden Point would be industry or sector agnostic? You've talked about energy. Or would you use it to boost investment in other specific targeted sectors or industries?
Yeah, so obviously it depends how large the concentric circle is.
Yeah.
And the focus initially is on energy, but I do know that other sectors such as logistics and transport, they've also put various ideas forward. But I feel that I'm on the strongest ground by focusing on energy. I am the Associate Energy Minister. And I'd say to your viewers and listeners, unless we act in an innovative, imaginative way on energy policy, then we're not going to achieve economic resilience.
Oh, for sure. Would you be open to lobbying by other sectors for inclusion? In other words, if a sector was to get its act together and come to you to say, look, we'd be interested in setting up in Marsden, here's the value we can provide, would your office be open to that form of lobbying?
Bro, that's my day job.
Okay, good. So you're not ruling out an approach by other.
Now, people have already been in contact with me as I move around the country. But obviously, as you've identified, we govern on the basis of the cabinet platform.
Yeah.
And we're three parties, and as we go forward, we have to find common ground with each other.
Okay. Would you require organisations setting up in a special economic zone, or at least aiming to take advantage of the incentives on offer, to meet some form of minimum threshold on the level of investment, job creation, or similar? Would startups, either Kiwi ones or those from elsewhere, receive some form of special dispensation on any of that?
Yeah, so there's already a number of fresh investors working with Marsden Point, with Channel, as we speak. And a number of them were referred to, if I'm not mistaken, at their recent share market announcement. But look, we'll borrow the best ideas and try and achieve parity with how these zones have enabled a fresh spurt of economic activity and investment in other parts of the world. So we won't be finessing it in isolation from what has failed and what has worked in other like-minded economies. And obviously my leader constantly looks at Singapore. And
with good reason. Yeah.
Yeah, but Peter, the challenge, as you've already put it out, is that this is so unorthodox in terms of how New Zealand has the one one size will fit and meet every problem. Well, I think our situation, mate, with energy and related challenges is such that we've got to innovate.
Yeah, absolutely. So would the benefits of setting up in a special economic zone be open to New Zealand-based organisations, or just international ones wanting to invest in the country? And in either case, would it be by government or economic development agency invitation only, or would anyone be able to set up in a special economic zone, do you think?
In other parts of the world, it's often international entities in partnership with domestic interests. And that's a sweet spot. I don't think it's necessary for my officials to wander around picking winners, promote the opportunity, and where people feel that it's worth the effort, being located near our most prestigious natural deepwater port, then let them make that decision. But once again, in England, the economic development agencies played a big role in attracting investment. In the case of Singapore, their experience has largely been build the road and the cars will come.
Yeah. So how would you prevent existing New Zealand-based firms from simply shutting up shop somewhere, possibly even in another economically struggling region, and shifting lock, stock and barrel into a special economic zone? Of course, in such a scenario, there would be no economic gain to the country, and almost certainly a loss. How would you discourage that kind of behaviour?
Well, the challenge is at the margin, any entity establishing itself in a zone, are they adding to productivity? Are they expanding the economic export revenue generating capacity of the country? Or are you just moving pieces around the chessboard? So no, the purpose of the zone is not to depopulate one part of the country and crowd everyone into Marsden Point. And to be honest with you, unless you're tightly focused on energy and you've got an idea that is going to have a dynamic effect on energy resilience, then that ought to be the test.
Right.
But if all you're doing is moving a widget factory from Fielding to Marsden Point, then stay in Manawatu.
Yeah, exactly. So there will be some kind of threshold. Officials will be looking at some kind of threshold for being eligible for the benefits of establishing and operating in that special.
Yeah, I mean, one debate was New Zealand should start to import LNG as a hedge against energy volatility and energy uncertainty. And in my view, if you wanted to set up a facility importing LNG, I don't think you'd be able to get it consented within 8 to 10 years. That is the level of constipation that afflicts our economy, which is why we passed the fast-track legislation. And I'm not holding a candle for LNG imported one way or the other. I do believe that gas has a profound future to play in our energy resilience. So there may be different reasons as to why you might have a bespoke zone. If a future government says we have to keep the lights on, we have to import LNG, and then we're going to have it in a zone where we're not spending the next 6-7 years arguing about frogs and lizards and strange birds and other critters that have been deified to the extent that Kiwis have lost their jobs. I don't belong to a party who tolerates that sort of nonsense.
Yeah. All right. Now, do you envisage the new foreign direct investment agency, Invest New Zealand, in marketing and promoting these special economic zones, plural, if there are plural, internationally? And if so, what role do you see for local business leaders and regional economic development agencies in this process?
No, I see a very positive role for our local economic development agency. And I'm disappointed to hear that our local CEO strikes this glacial indifference when he comes to Wellington, but it doesn't surprise me. That's just the politics of the bureaucracy, and put that to the side. On the question of the new investment agency, well, it's still standing itself up, but it's got a reasonably challenging job ahead of it. not only because of the Prime Minister's Economic Summit, but also my colleague, Mr. Seymour, is shepherding legislation through the system that is going to make it a lot simpler to bring money into the country and invest in businesses. And I think energy is a distinctive and unique challenge. If we do not boost energy security or shrink the cost of energy, then I have, in my own view, our economy is going to stagnate.
Okay. I wonder if you feel there should be any sort of tie-in between special economic zones and tertiary education, Minister. For instance, when it comes to R&D, would you consider linking economic incentives for participating businesses with formal ties to NZ universities or other tertiary alternatives?
Well, I find that that's already happening. If you take, for example, the work that we're doing with supercritical geothermal, sadly it's not in Ngāwhā because the more profound resources in the Bay of Plenty. The people that are exploring how to unleash this new source of energy, they're all working with the Auckland University, they're working with international experts, they're working with international investors, and I genuinely feel if we can get the incentives right and start and create the first one, the market's got its own dynamism. But the market, if you take an approach of the Ruth Richardson School and the Crown should do nothing and leave it to the market, no other country is doing that any longer. Australia, Singapore, Canada, where I've just come back from, the UK, the EU, God forbid, Donald Trump, the citadel of capitalism.
Yeah.
Not even he's taking that approach. And of course, the Chinese have always had a different approach. So why would you think that 5 million people in one of the most distant parts of the planet are possessed of a higher level of economic sophistication or philosophical morality, that somehow people are going to suddenly flock here unless we incentivize them to come here?
Oh, New Zealand exceptionalism, Shane. It's the great blight of our being.
Well, there is a small problem that we are a kind of like a scientific laboratory for a lot of purists. But hey, mate, I'm a politician. If you want to be pure, join a religion. Don't come into politics.
So no specific mandate from your end. You're not envisaging any kind of mandate that says, hey, Joe Bloggs, you want to come and take advantage of our special economic zone at Marsden Point. You have to work with a university, a New Zealand tertiary institution. No mandate, but you feel that would happen organically.
Look, if investors need assistance and connections with our tertiary sector and fresh dollops of human capital, they can work that out.
Yeah. Hey, do you envisage folding the regional deal process in with this potential special economic zone process, or is your preference to keep the two processes entirely distinct and separate?
Well, the regional deal is on a different trajectory, and it's through the Internal Affairs Department. And people are ponying up their various transactions. But no, this is more industry policy.
Okay, all right. What sort of incentives do you envisage central government bringing to any special economic zone? Are we talking lower corporate tax rate, GST exemptions, tariff and duty reductions, the old tariff discussion, or exemptions, streamline consenting, any or all of these?
Well, we're not a tariff-rich nation for a start. I don't know of any particular good where we have egregiously high levels of tariffs.
No, I think we have a symbolic level of tariff in a number of areas.
They're very modest. They're very modest.
Yeah.
So, as I said at the beginning of this interview, we'll scout around and have a look at what's worked in other parts of the world. Obviously, the tricky bit is taxation.
Yeah.
And it comes back to this. I mean, how much do you want an energy transition? Or do you just want to trust the orthodox historical approach? And if you do, well, don't be surprised if you keep getting the same result. I mean, why would you come to New Zealand unless you could see that we were following a profound vision to shrink the cost of energy and boost the security of energy? Why would you bother to come to New Zealand?
Yeah.
I mean, people are leaving New Zealand, they tell me, because of energy crisis.
True that. So listen, how do you intend to work with local government, particularly Whangarei District Council and Northern Regional Council on this? What will you be looking for from them? What do you expect from
Nothing.
that quarter?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing. I don't imagine in an economic zone with a bespoke planning authority that the regional council or district council will have anything whatsoever to do with it.
What role would you see in the establishment of a Northland Special Economic Zone for our Regional Economic Development Agency, Northland Inc.? Paul and
That's important. They understand better than I do the difficulty of attracting overseas investors or indeed metropolitan investors to come to the Northland region.
Listen, when I spoke to Paul about this whole idea a couple of weeks ago, he talked about the role an SEZ could play in the development of specialty clusters in high value, sort of added value niche industries. There was the fuel and the biofuel and the energy thing, but there was also things like marine engineering. I guess the question that I need to put to you is a specific piece of real estate. You talked about concentric circles. But is a specific piece of real estate necessary for this concept to work? Isn't the idea of designating a specific geographical area within a target region just a little bit old-fashioned? What's stopping someone in Wellington from saying something like, right, if you're a marine engineering firm and we want to boost the economy in Northland, come on into anywhere in Northland. Come on into Opua, come into Dargaville, come into Whangarei, come into anywhere in Northland and receive your bountiful benefits from your loving government down in Wellington. What's the point of a specific concentric circle tightly held at Marsden Point?
That gets devilishly complicated to administer, I'm told, by tax experts. Yeah. And it does fly in the face of what we're still struggling to come to terms with, picking winners. But I say again, whether the Calvinistic purists of economic policy accept it or not, other countries are doing it.
Yeah.
And are we really that ethically superior than every other country that somehow we've got an elixir, we've got a secret sauce here that's going to make us richer than they are? Well, please show it to me, because we're getting poorer every year in terms of comparative status of GDP per capita tabulations.
Realistically, what sort of time frame do you have in mind? I mean, you mentioned earlier, you pointed out earlier quite correctly that we're into campaigning again next year.
Yeah.
This isn't something that can be debated, consulted on, evolved, and legislated for during the remaining parliamentary term, is it?
Well, let's wait and see, mate. I'll keep the pedal to the metal.
Yeah.
But I'm being just straight up with everyone I talk to in the event that it proves to be too much of a mouthful before the next election. Mm-hmm. It'll represent part of the menu that we put before Kiwis.
Okay.
We've got a lot of other things to do as well, not the least of which is to pass all the RMA legislation, and obviously we've got to support David Seymour with his foreign direct investment liberalisation. There are three areas that New Zealand First insisted be protected. That's fisheries quota, that's pastoral land, with a bit of wriggle room at the margin, and housing. We're not going to globalise access to our housing stock at a time where young people can't even afford to buy a house.
Mm. Turning back to Paul Linton's Wellington experience, what are the major sticking points to this concept within the bureaucracy? What objections or contrary guidance are you hearing from civil servants?
Oh, it's fair to say it's a foreign idea to them. Mm. Designating a particular portion of a region and endowing a defined real estate area with certain powers and certain incentives that aren't available to every other part of the country. And the Marsden Point location, I think, is unique because of its centrality and the criticality it has as a gateway of energy. And it's got the infrastructure, it's got a port. And look, a lot of things in politics makes a bit of suck and see.
And listen, finally, I know you need to leave, but just finally, would it be, you've talked about David Seymour shepherding sort of sympathetic legislation through Parliament. On the whole subject of SEZs, would it be too much to dare hope for cross party support on this idea? I mean, I heard, or I think I read David Seymour telling NBR that he thought it was better to have the best possible financial and legislative terms set for investors consistently right across the country, rather than in specific SEZs. Have you had conversations with the opposition, for example, around this?
I don't believe that Labour will back it, because David Parker and I promoted these ideas when I was a part of Labour. But Peter, MMP politics and the need to find pragmatic outcomes, don't ever underestimate the interest that political parties place upon securing power.
Very good. That is an awesome way to end this discussion. Honourable Matua Shane, thank you very much indeed. It is always a pleasure to talk to you. Listen, all the very, very best with this initiative, and your lips to God's ear, Shane. Take care.
Okay, mate. Bye.
And that's that. That's the first episode of True North, done and dusted. Thank you very, very much for listening in, and thanks to Minister Shane Jones. True North will return on Wednesday next week, the 9th of April, when we'll be asking Ocean Flyer CEO Shah Aslam for an update on his plans to launch an innovative 40-minute sea glider service between Whangarei and Auckland. 2 years ago, he told us this would be happening next year. Is this still the plan? I'm Peter Heath. Thank you for listening. True North is an original podcast by Due North PR. To support our work and to stay on top of Northland business news and analysis, access the pod on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Please do take that small extra step and subscribe, like, follow, comment, and review, as it helps others find the show. Please also share it with those who may not yet be aware that we exist. As the New Zealand media landscape continues to change, we rely on your support to continue doing what we do. Please let us know what you think about the podcast. Ask questions or make suggestions about topics and people we should feature by emailing us at truenorth@duenorthpr.co.nz. We do read every message.